Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Udiraye Nashtaprayeshu Vadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavata Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavatir Naishtike Om Agyan Triminandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Om Agyan Triminandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So resuming our discussion from 1:12:26, and just to reestablish the context, we are in the part of chapter 12 that deals with the birth of Maharaj Parikshit, and then more specifically we are talking about the predictions made by the Brahmanas about the characteristic, the activities, and the future life of, uh, of Parikshit Maharaj. Rajarishīnām janayatā sāstā chotpatagaminām nigrahīt kaleresha bhuvadharmasya karanāt. This child will be like the father of kings, who will be like sages. For world peace and for the sake of religion, he will be the chastiser of the upstarts and the quarrels. So the previous verse ended with the Vipras talking about the qualities of Maharaj Parikshit. So in that set of verses, they had described 20 different qualities of Parikshit Maharaj, and we have briefly gone over the list. Now they will be talking about the life of Parikshit Maharaj, and finally they will talk about his ending pastime. So what here they're predicting is that the children, the son of Maharaj Parikshit, will be Raj Rishi now, just like him. And this is important because of the position of Maharaj Parikshit. So Maharaj Parikshit is the king. So just like we see that Maharaj Yudhishthir, he is very preoccupied with Parikshit Maharaj, not so much because of familial connection, but because he wants to have a worthy person to take over the rule of the kingdom from him. So Prabhupada mentions that for a pious king, the citizens are like children. And the king is not only the father, but also the spiritual leader. So out of that sense of responsibility, Maharaj Yudhishthir is concerned about Parikshit Maharaj. And for the same reason, the Brahmanas are also assuring Maharaj Yudhishthir that Parikshit Maharaj will not only be a suitable successor, but he will also create a suitable lineage. So here they are saying that he will be his sons will be like Raj Rishis, and we know that Maharaj Parikshit is going to be succeeded by Janmejaya, and Janmejaya himself is a great king. Specifically, he is mentioned for performing the the Sarpa Yagya. When he hears that Maharaj Parikshit was bitten by Takshak, he gets very angry. And then he says that he asks the Brahmanas to perform a yagya which would kill all the snakes in the universe. And because the influence of the yagyas, thousands and millions of snakes are killed. But Takshak, the snake that actually bit Parikshit Maharaj, takes protection from Indra. And then ultimately there is some more pastimes that happen, and then he stops his sacrifice. But we can see the potency of Maharaj Janmejaya. In addition to that, the sages say that he will be the chastiser of mischievous elements, which is the duty of a king. So the king not only guides the citizens, but also protects them. So the sages talk about protection from three kinds of mischievous elements. So they say Gaminam. So Gam means to go. So Gaminam is those who stray away from the path of dharma, adharmic people. And these could be people who are just passive. So they may be atheists. So they're in the conventional sense, they may not be doing any harm. But just because they're steering away from the path of dharma, they are vitiating the environment. So these are the Gaminams. Then there is the Nigrahita. So Nigrahita is what we now consider as criminals. Ahit means those who, so hit means welfare. Ahit means the opposite of welfare. So those who consciously try to harm others. So these are like thieves and murderers, or people who are molesting others. And then the third is the Kalehe. So Kalehe are the quarrelsome people. So these are people who are just fond of quarrel. May or may not be for a valid reason, but they just vitiate the environment because of their tendency to quarrel. And each one of these are dealt through different ways. So the Gaminam are dealt by spiritual edification, so that they understand the process of dharma. And the Nigrahita, they are imprisoned or they are executed. So some kind of punishment is given to them. And the Kalehe, or the quarrelsome, they are mostly dealt by allowing them an opportunity to refocus their energy. So in any environment when there is a lot of quarrel that is happening, the people try to increase the influence of the mode of goodness, through whether it is through sattvic activities like music or art, by creating parks and gardens, by creating an environment that is conducive. So their minds are calmed. So Maharaj Parikshit will be an expert in handling all these kinds of deviations. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, so Nigrahita Kaleresha Bhuva Dharmasya Karanat, he translates it a little bit differently and into a future prediction. So he says that what the Brahmanas are saying that Nigrahita Kalere Esha. So Nigrahita is one who is inimical, but Kaler he translates as the personification of Kali. So they're saying that Maharaj Parikshit, he will chastise Kali Bhuva Dharmasya Karanat, for the purpose of protecting dharma. So this pastime we will see will play out later on also. Okay, next verse. So just to give you a little bit of heads up, we have I think we have about 10 verses left in this chapter. After that, I'll stop and then we'll see what we want to do. Either we can spend the rest of the time in Q&A. So I know we covered a lot of topics that I did not stop that much for questions because to maintain the flow. So if people have questions that have basically stockpiled since then, this is a good opportunity to discuss. If not, we'll continue with the 13th chapter. So just wanted to give you also some time to think about it. Okay, so we'll go to the next verse, 112:27. Takshadatmano mrityum duja putra pasharjitat prapatat sayat upashrutya mukta sangha padam hare. After hearing about his death, which will be caused by the birth of a snake, by the bite of a snake bird sent by the son of a Brahman, he will get himself freed from all material detachment and surrender unto the personality of Godhead, taking shelter of him. So the Brahmanas have spoken about the birth of Parishit Maharaj, the circumstances of his protection in the womb of Uttara, subsequent birth. They have spoken about the qualities of Maharaj Parikshit. And in a few verses, they've spoken about the rule of Maharaj Parikshit. Now they're speaking about the death of Maharaj Parikshit. Now, under general circumstances, the Brahmanas or even the astrologers do not speak about death. Part of it is because of social decorum, and part of it is because it is in astrology, it is one of the more difficult things to predict, specifically at the time of Jati Karma. So when you're celebrating somebody's, it's like going to somebody's birthday and talking about his death. And this is the first birthday. So this is when Parishit Maharaj has just taken birth. And you start speaking about his death. It's inauspicious. And it also violates social etiquette. But the reason they're speaking about it is because Parishit Maharaj is a special case. His death is actually more glorious than his birth and activities. So in his birth, he was protected by Krishna, which is what made it glorious. In his life, he acts according to the desire of Krishna. And then his death is the same. So that is why when they speak about his death, they also talk about the fact that he will get himself free from all material attachment and surrender unto the personality of Godhead. So that's why they're speaking about his death. So how many people can lay claim to this kind of a death? Because the description that they have given is clearly that of going back to Godhead. Mukta Sang Padma Vrajit. So in that mood of glorification, they're also talking about the death of Parishit Maharaj. In the Krama Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami says that this particular verse forms the basis of a subsequent question that is asked by the sages in the 18th chapter of the first canto. So the sages, based on this verse, will ask the question that please describe those topics of the Lord by which Maharaj Parikshit, whose intelligence was fixed on liberation, attained the lotus feet of the Lord, who is the shelter of Garud, the king of birds. Those topics were vibrated by the son of Vyas. So that question is kind of a paraphrase of this verse, but of course then it leads to the description of the or not the description, it leads to the retelling of the Bhagavatam spoken by Sukadeva Goswami to Parikshit Maharaj. So 112:28. Jigyasitatma yathartayo munirvyasasutadasau itvedad nripagangayam yasyati yadha kuto bhayam. After inquiring about proper knowledge from the son of Vyasadeva, who will be a great philosopher, he will renounce all material attachments and achieve a life of fearlessness. So, the previous verse talked about two things that will happen at the time of the death of Parikshit Maharaj. So, one is Mukta Sang, and the second is Padmavrajit. That means Mukta Sang is material detachment, and Padmavrajit is spiritual attachment. So he will go to the lotus feet of Krishna. So talks about spiritual attachment. So the catalyst to the material detachment is the cursing by Shringi. When Maharaj Parikshit learns that he has 7 days to live before he dies, he becomes fully renounced at the time. And even though Maharaj Parikshit was as Sutta Goswami has shared, he is a Mahabhagavat, which means that by nature he was fully detached. But he was going through his duty as an emperor, which means that as an emperor he was doing everything that is needed. He was protecting his citizens, chastising the miscreants, protecting the boundaries of the kingdom. So everything that a king does, he was doing that. But when he gets the news that he has only 7 more days to live, he gives up everything. So Mukta Sang, he gives up everything. This verse talks about how does he get Padmavrajit, and how does he develop spiritual attachment. So the spiritual attachment that he develops is after inquiring about proper self-knowledge from the son of Vyasadeva. So achieving a life of fearlessness means achieving a spiritual life. Because no one situated in the material conception can become fearless. So when earlier on we had discussed that this is in the prayers of Kunti Devi, when she was talking about the provider of Abhay Dan. So we were talking about the fact that Kunti Devi was glorifying Krishna as one who awards spiritual life. That's the characteristic of spiritual life, fearlessness. And conversely, the characteristic of material life is fearfulness. So essentially this verse is talking about the speaking of the Bhagavatam. It is a glorification of Maharaj Parikshit, and also it's a glorification of the potency of the Bhagavatam. That by hearing the Bhagavatam, Parikshit Maharaj, he is able to become attached to the lotus feet of Krishna, and he is able to achieve a life of fearfulness. So the Brahmanas describe the Bhagavatam indirectly over here. So they say Jigyasitatma Yathartya. That Jigyasa, that he will acquire Atma. He will inquire about the nature of the Atma, which means the nature of the soul. Atma also points to Krishna, Paramatma also. So he will inquire about all this, which basically is the essence of the Bhagavatam from Muner Yasya Sutat, from the son of Vyasa, who is a great rishi, and this conversation will happen Gangayam. The conversation will happen on the banks of the river Ganges. So this particular, based on the conversation,
between the son of Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva had only one son, Sukadev Goswami. There is only one conversation of this type that happens on the bank of the river Ganges. So we can understand that the Brahmanas are speaking of the Bhagavad. Jiva Goswami, in this verse, he actually quotes a later verse that appears in the 10th canto. And he quotes the verse really to substantiate the content of the verse, not really for the activity or the event. So the fact that the sages are saying that he will acquire fearlessness. So Jiva Goswami says that later on in the Bhagavatam, there is another verse that is spoken which talks about fearlessness. Now, there are many verses that are spoken, but Jiva Goswami picks up this one. This one is special because it is spoken by Devaki to Krishna at the time of his birth. This is Canto 10, 327. And the verse, translation of the verse goes like, so Devaki is saying to Krishna, no one in this material world has become free from the four principles, birth, death, old age, and disease, even by fleeing to various planets. But now that you have appeared, my Lord, death is fleeing in fear of you. And the living entities, having obtained shelter of your lotus feet, by your mercy are sleeping in full mental peace. So Jiva Goswami is essentially elaborating upon Abhay, that how fearlessness can only be awarded by Krishna. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, Srimad Bhagavatam gives us the chance to change the quality of anxiety from matter to spirit. So it's a very interesting statement by Srila Prabhupada. He is not saying that Srimad Bhagavatam gives us an opportunity to come out of anxiety. He's saying that it gives us an opportunity to change the anxiety from material to spiritual. So in the material world, everybody is anxious about these four things: birth, death, disease, and old age, or they're they're anxious about eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. That anxiety, the object of the anxiety changes. What's the anxiety in the spiritual world? The anxiety there is how to serve Krishna and his devotees. And that anxiety is nourishing, just like the anxiety in the material world is the opposite of it, and it is debilitating. So Srila Prabhupada also takes this opportunity to establish two aspects because of which this conversation is being glorified. One, that the person was hearing it in the right mood. And the second, he was hearing it from the right source. So because it's appearing in the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada uses this opportunity to re-emphasize that. So he criticizes the professional speakers of the Bhagavatam in the purport, that people like to go and hear from them, and they artificially cry, or sometimes they will have some kind of theatrics, and people will sit and enjoy it, and they will clap, and they will dance, and they will cry, and they will go away, and nobody gets any benefit out of it, neither the speaker nor the audience. But the reason that Parikshit Maharaj, just by hearing the Bhagavatam, attained perfection was because he inquired from a bona fide source, and then he also heard from him in the proper mood. Prabhupada says, imitative hearing of the Srimad Bhagavatam is a caricature only. One should not be misled by such a performance of Bhagavad Saptah undertaken by ridiculous, greedy fellows to maintain an establishment of material enjoyment. So Prabhupada, generally speaking, was not very much in favor of Bhagavad Saptas. Now, we kind of have to take it with a little bit of the context that Prabhupada says, because we know that now, there are disciples of Prabhupada who do Bhagavad Saptas that are well attended also. So Prabhupada was more against the embellishments of the Bhagavad Sapta that he speaks over here. Like, he says that they are caricature only by a performance undertaken by ridiculous, greedy people to maintain an establishment of material enjoyment. Right? The saptas that are spoken in that mood, which is actually probably the mainstream in India. Even in Vrindavan, if you go to Bhagavad Saptas, they pretty much start from the 10th canto. And it's a commingling of different things. Most of the Bhagavad Saptas are very good. They're very good singers also. So they sing very well also. They'll also arrange some small skits and dramas, and they have stuff that's going on. So doesn't give much benefit to anybody. Definitely does not achieve the purpose of the Bhagavatam, which is why Prabhupada criticizes it. Next verse, 1229, 11229. Iti rajna upadisya viprajata kovidaha labdapachityaha sarve prati jagmuh swakan grahan. Thus, those who were expert in astrological knowledge and in performance of the birth ceremony instructed King Yudhishthir about the future history of his child. Then, being sumptuously remunerated, they all returned to their respective homes. So iti, so it starts with thus, which basically indicates that this particular segment is now ended. So Sutta Goswami is recounting the discussions between the Brahmanas and Maharaj Yudhishthir, and this particular verse, it says iti. Iti means so that after they had done, which is basically talking about the birth quality and the death of Parikshit Maharaj, their interaction ended over here, and he talks about Viprajata Kovidaha. So this is a particular category of Brahmans which specialize in Jatak Kovida. So Jatak ceremony is birth ceremony, and there's a particular subsection of Vipras that specialize in the ceremonies that are associated with birth. An important part of this ceremony is reading the astrological chart of the child. So he says, thus the Vipra Jata Kovida, they were remunerated. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about, he talks about, because the term is used here, he talks about the difference between Vipras, Brahmanas, and Vaishnavas. And this is something we discussed in the past also, but quickly we'll recap, because Prabhupada recaps that Vipras are those who specialize in Karma Kand. So they are experts in the Samhitas, the part of the Vedas that talk about karma kand. And mostly they help in the performance of samskars. So the Vipra are one who understand the karma part of the Vedas, and they understand how to conduct the sacrifices that are the yagyas that are given in the karma part of the Vedas. During the Vedic time, it was very important for all the families to have a Vipra, because they were so. It was so important for them to live their lives according to the Vedic processes. So we know that when the Pandavas were in the forest, then they were advised by. I'm thinking that they were advised by Vishwamitra, but I may be wrong. But they were strongly advised to get a Vipra. They said that the person who advised them said that you're in a precarious situation. Maybe it was Vyasadeva, that you're in a precarious situation.
Angarparna?
I'm sorry?
Angarparna, there was one Gandharva, like on the bank of lake, Arjuna fights with him.
Angarparna, maybe. So very strong recommendation that you should get a Vipra. And that's why they go and get Dhaumya. And Dhaumya is the one who guides them through the various karma kand part. Then Prabhupada says that those who are more anchored in the philosophical aspect of the Vedas, the Gyan Kand, they are the Brahmanas, and they provide philosophical guidance. And then those who understand the purpose of the Upasana Kand, they are the Vaishnavas, who basically guide for the ultimate purpose of life. So earlier on, and I think this was in the second chapter, we had a little bit of discussion that how everybody is born a Shudra. Through the process of samskar, they become a Vipra. So the Vipra is, to the process of samskars, they become a Dvija. And by reading the Vedas, they become a Vipra. Then the Brahmanas is one who understand the Brahman. So that's how they become the Brahmanas. And then one understands that the ultimate purpose of life is to surrender to Krishna, they take the position of Vaishnavas. Okay, next verse. Saesha loka vikyata parikshed iti yat prabhu purvam drashtum anudhyayan pariksheta nareshvyaha. So his son would become famous in the world as Parikshit, examiner. He would come because he would come to examine all human beings in his search after that personality whom he saw after his birth. Thus, he would come to constantly contemplate it. So, even though it's not fully clear, but this appears to be the Namkaran verse. So generally, along with the Jati Samskar, the Namkaran is also done. And the reason it's not fully clear because the previous verse indicated the conclusion of the interaction with the Vipras. But the Namkaran is also done by the recommendation of the Vipras. So many times we see that when we look at these Vedic personalities, their name seems to have a bearing bearing on their pastimes. And that's why sometimes people misread it, saying that these characters are symbolic. They represent a notion, like Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra is one who clings on very tenaciously to the kingdom, or Vidur, one who is wise, or like Bhima. Bhima is one who is strong. But the reason that the names bear a resonance with their activities and personalities later on is what we are seeing in this verse. That the Vipras, on reading the time of birth, the constellations, the stars at the time, understand the nature of the person's personality, the activities they will do, and they give a name that is commensurate to it. So here what we see is that they're giving him the name of Parikshit. And the reason that they say that he will be called Parikshit, so Parikshit is one who examines. And the reason they say that he will be, this name Parikshit is applied to him, is because he had the audience of Krishna in the womb of his mother, and throughout his life he will examine everything around him to try and discern the same personality, and he will examine and say, is Krishna there? So since he will be constantly examining for the presence of Krishna, his name would be Parikshit. So it says Anudhyayan Nareshu Yaha. Anudhyayan means that dhyan means wonder. Anudhyayan means what follows dhyan, which is basically meditation or reflection. Nareshu Yaha, other people. And what will he examine them for? He will examine them to see Krishna in them, or he will examine them to see, are they Krishna? Is this person the personality that I saw while in the womb? In the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, Srila Jiva Goswami remarks in this connection that every child, if given an impression of the Lord from his very childhood, certainly becomes a great devotee of the Lord, like Maharaj Parikshit. One may not be as fortunate as Maharaj Parikshit to have the opportunity to see the Lord in the womb of his mother. But even if he is not so fortunate, he can be made so if the parents of the child desire him to be so. So last time we had a bit of a discussion, I think it was Paramatma Prabhu, who was mentioning Garbhodaya Samskar, how effective it is or not. This to some extent addresses that point. That if one is not fortunate enough to have the proper samskars done, whether it is the Garbhodaya Samskar, or because of the previous activities, if they are not fortunate enough to see Krishna before birth, but still it does not mean that there are no other opportunities there. So the focus then moves to the parents. It doesn't move, the focus is always on the parents, but the emphasis is there more so. And now the parents can give the opportunity to associate with Krishna. And this is again by creating an environment that is conducive to the child's Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada in the purport talks a little bit about himself also. And so it's Prabhupada in his usual humble mood, where he says that whatever little devotion that I have, and if I have any claims to be a devotee, it is only because of my parents, because I was born in a devotee household. So right from the beginning, he talks about his two fathers. He talks about Gaur Mohan De, and he talks about Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He says because of the mercy of these two fathers, I have some claim to being a devotee. Next verse. Sarajputra Vavrade Ashushukla Ivodapaha Apuryamanaha Pitrubhi Kashadbiriva Sonavaham. As the moon in its waxing fortnight develops day after day, so the royal prince Parikshit very soon develops luxuriantly under the care and full facilities of his guardian grandfathers. So the previous verse ends the discussion about the birth of Parikshit Maharaj. So the birth of Parikshit Maharaj was basically the questioning by Maharaj Yudhishthir and the prediction made by the Vipras. So the Namkarna, so to speak, ends that event. This verse talks about Parikshit Maharaj's growth, his childhood, all the way his growth into adulthood. So not much is spoken or known about this period from his birth. So a lot is spoken about Parikshit Maharaj before his birth, and some is spoken about him at the time of his birth. But this is the only verse that talks about Parikshit Maharaj's intervening time period. So we know that Parikshit Maharaj was 36 years old when he became the emperor. No, Parikshit Maharaj was yes, that's true. So he was 36 years old when he became an emperor. He ruled for 24 years. And at the time when he gave up his body, he was 60 years of age. So in the later chapters, we will see about Parikshit Maharaj as an emperor. He's already been he's been enthroned, coronated, and what does he do after that? But this period from his birth till he became an emperor, this is the only verse that it just says that as the moon grows, the waxing moon, as the moon grows, Maharaj Parikshit also grows, and so it says Apurimanaha. Apurimanaha means surrounded with affection. Pitrubhi, surrounded by affections from his parents. Factually speaking, Abhimanyu was not there, and most of the contemporaries of Abhimanyu were also killed. So Pitrubhi is notional of those who occupied a father figure. It mostly points to the Pandavas. So even though they were grandparents, but they still come in the category of Pitrubhi. So the Pandavas were the ones who were showering affection and guidance, and under their love, Purimana. Does anybody know which verse in Bhagavad Gita starts from Purimana? Just trivia. It appears in the second chapter, Purimana Chalpatishtam Samudramapa. So talks about how the ocean is undisturbed when the rivers flow into it. So Apurimana there means becoming constantly full. Here is translated as as luxuriant. So, close meanings. Under the guidance of the Pandavas, surrounded by affection, Parishad Maharaj, Parishad Maharaj goes. It's not mentioned in the Bhagavatam, but it's elsewhere mentioned that Parishad Maharaj married. He married Madravati. So Madravati came from Madras, this same kingdom as Madhuri, the wife of Pandu. And the only other mention of Parishad Maharaj is actually in Atharva Veda, where he's again mentioned in passing, as in the lineage that is being described. He's mentioned in passing over there as a powerful emperor, as a pious king there. So he's known as Raja Vishwanjana, as the king of the world, the emperor over there. So I'm thinking that I'll continue till I reach the end of the chapter, and then I'll take a break. So 112:32. Yakshamano ashvamedhena kyati droha jihasaya raja labdhano dhadyau nanyattakaradandaya. Just at this time, King Yudhishthir was considering performing a horse sacrifice to get freed from sins incurred from fighting with kingsmen. But he became anxious to get some wealth, for there was no surplus funds outside of fines and tax collection. So, discussion of Parishad Maharaj is over now. Spoken about his birth, spoken about his death, his qualities. One verse speaks about everything else, the childhood, the growth of Parishad Maharaj. Sutta Goswami is now speaking about Maharaj Yudhishthir and his desire to do Ashwamedha Yagya. It seems like a break in the flow, but it actually is not, because you look at the chapter, it begins with the glorification of Maharaj Yudhishthir. Then Sutta Goswami answers the question about Maharaj Parikshit, and he ends the chapter by again talking about Maharaj Yudhishthir. So this verse speaks about the desire of Maharaj Yudhishthir to perform Ashwamedha Yagya. So one thing, as we have reminded in the past, is that the Puranas, they are not in a linear fashion based on time. So we see that how the Sutta Goswami, he's going back and forth in time. Spoke about the birth of Maharaj Parikshit, spoke about the death of Maharaj Parikshit. Now he's speaking about a time that happens somewhere between after the birth and before the death of Maharaj Parikshit. So earlier on, there was a mention of the Ashwamedha Yagya, which was in the 8th chapter, in the 6th verse. So there Sutta Goswami had said that Krishna caused 3 well-formed Ashwamedha Yagyas to be conducted by Maharaj Yudhishthir. And there again it was, we had discussed that it was out of time sequence. Because this verse immediately followed that Krishna wanted to leave Hastinapur, go to Dwarka. Yudhishthira Maharaj said, no, don't go, stay back. Krishna agrees to stay back. And the next verse is that Krishna performs helps in the performance of 3 Ashwamedha Yagya. So one would think that at that time Krishna was helping the performance, but actually that activity comes much later on. And the same point is made over here, that it is coming much later on. So from here till the end of the chapter, from 32 to 36, the 5 verses, they essentially speak about the performance of this Ashwamedha Yagya. So desiring to perform the Ashwamedha Yagya, the main problem that Maharaj Yudhishthira faces is lack of funds. Because in the battle of Mahabharata, the treasury was depleted, and there was a little bit of money that comes from taxes and fines, but that is used for the running of the kingdom. So he had no surplus. He had no surplus funds. But the reason Maharaj Yudhishthira was anxious to perform the Ashwamedha Yagya was because he was afraid of the sins that had been committed during the execution of the battle of Mahabharata. In the Kram Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami, he quotes Chitsukha. So Chitsukha is again a famous commentator on the Bhagavatam, who appears about 300 years before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did. So Jiva Goswami quotes, he's more from the Advaita line. He's a follower of Sripad Shankaracharya. But around that time, everybody was a follower of Shankaracharya. Vaishnavism was still what would be now considered as fringies. So Vaishnavas were considered to be fringies at the time. The foremost disciple of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Baldev Vidyabhushan, he himself was an impersonalist. And only when he entered a debate with Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and was defeated in the debate, that he changed his views and became a foremost Vaishnav. So Jiva Goswami says that Chitsukha at this point, he adds an extra verse over here, which translates to, he thought of performing a horse sacrifice to satisfy the Lord on the instructions of Bhishma. Otherwise, there would be disrespect to Bhishma. So this is just a matter of interest. Next verse, 112:33. Tad abhipretam alakshya bharata chut choditaha dhanam prahinam ajarahur udicham dishi bhurishaha. Understanding the hearty wishes of the king, his brothers, as advised by the infallible Lord Krishna, collected sufficient riches from the north, left by King Marut. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada gives a brief biographic sketch of King Marut, who was a famous, again I won't go into all the details, but he was a famous king in the lineage of the Somavanshis. And he was so famous that when he performed yagyas, the devas would come to accept the oblations. And he became so powerful and famous that Indra became envious of him. So then Indra, he instructed Brihaspati not to help him, not to perform any more sacrifices for him. So King Marut is so desolate because of that he actually wants to commit suicide. So important for him was to perform these yagyas. And then he's rescued by Narad Muni. Narad Muni advises him, and he actually gets the younger brother of Brihaspati to perform the the yajna for him. And by the mercy of Lord Shiva, he gets access to a peak in the Himalayas that is made of solid gold. So using the gold from the peak, he performs this yajna. And Prabhupada says that in that yajna, everything was made of gold. The utensils were gold, the tent was made of gold, the chairs were gold. And the Brahmanas, after the yajna was done, so just like we eat on paper plates and then we throw the plates away, so they ate on the golden plates, they threw the plates away. And Prabhupada says that this was not a secret. People knew about it, but at that time people they were not so obsessed with wealth. And the only reason Maharaj Yudhishthir sends Arjun and others to get the wealth from there was to help him in the performance of the Ashwamedha Yajna. So Prabhupada makes the point that, really speaking, the only reason people pursued wealth was for the performance of spiritual activities, for the performance of yajnas, and they would only get as much that is needed. And then later on he says that in the current day and age, so he says from this we can understand that to perform karmakand yajnas, lot of paraphernalia is needed, lot of wealth is needed, which is not present in the current day and age. So best thing is to do Sankirtan Yajna. Tena samvrita sambharo dharmaputra yudhishtharaha vaji medhastribirbhita yajna samyajadharim. By those riches, the king could procure the ingredients for 3 horse sacrifices. Thus, the pious king Yudhishthir, who was very fearful after the battle of Kurukshetra, pleased Lord Hari, the personality of Godhead. So this verse summarizes some of the points that we had earlier on discussed, we are aware of. So one was that even though the Dharma Kshetra Kurukshetra, the battle of Kurukshetra was followed on the principles of Dharma, but still people who are moral, they also protect themselves against inadvertent sinful activities. So even in pursuing the path of Dharma, inadvertently sinful activities could be performed. In this case, it was the mass killing of millions of men, but otherwise also. For instance, for everybody who takes birth has the right to eat. That's the dharma. But inadvertently, this results in violence. So you may kill vegetables. That's violence. When you cook, you kill insects. That's violence. So that is why these yajnas are performed, to protect against these inadvertent sinful activities that are performed in the execution of one's own prescribed duties. The importance of wealth in a Vedic society is re-emphasized over here. It says that the only reason Maharaj Yudhishthir wanted this wealth was to perform the yajna. That was the real purpose of wealth. And what was the real purpose of performing the yajna? To please Lord Hari, the personality of Godhead. So Prabhupada talks about these as a reflection in the Vedic society. So Prabhupada in the purport says, if Maharaj Yudhishthir is a sinner in his daily discharge of duties in royal administration of state affairs, wherein killing of man and animals is a recognized art, then we can imagine the amount of sins committed consciously or unconsciously by the untrained population of the Kali Yuga, who have no way to perform sacrifice to please the Supreme Lord. The Bhagavatam says, therefore, that the prime duty of the human being is to satisfy the Supreme Lord by the performance of one's occupational duty. So here Prabhupada is quoting 1 to 13, that the highest perfection is to discharge your prescribed duties in order to please the personality of Godhead. So Prabhupada is making this point that this is Dwapar Yuga, and this is, we are talking about Maharaj Yudhishthir, who is a Mahajan, but even he is prone to performing sinful activities inadvertently. So what to speak about the current age of Kali, where people do not understand what the Vedas prohibit and recommend. So one can assume that they are performing sinful activities. Maharaj Yudhishthir, he had access to a golden peak to perform the Ashwamedha Yagya, to be freed of those sins. But in the current age, neither are the Brahmins available, nor that kind of wealth is available. So the point that Srila Prabhupada wants to make is that one should carefully read the Bhagavatam and engage in conversations about the Lord as a way to protect oneself from these kind of sinful reactions that are certainly being accrued by the residents of the age of Kali. Next verse, 35. Ahuto Bhagavan Raja Yajayitva Duje Nrapam Vasha Kati Chinmasan Surdam Priyakamyaya. Lord Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, being invited to the sacrifices of Maharaj Yudhishthir, saw to it that they were performed by qualified twice-born Brahmanas. After that, for the pleasure of the relatives, the Lord remained a few months. So we see a reference to this in the prayers by the residents of Dwarka, where they say that, "Oh Lord, you go to foreign countries and you often stay there." So Krishna, he would make visits to Hastinapur, and he would stay there. In the 10th chapter, we see the similar event occurring, that after the end of the battle, Krishna tries to leave for Hastinapur. Maharaj Yudhishthir asks him to stay back, and then he stays back a few months for the pleasure of, that time it says, for the pleasure of others headed by Subhadra. And here again, and this happens later on, Krishna again goes back, and he helps in the performance of the Ashwamedha Yagya, and he also stays back for the pleasure of his relatives. So this is the last verse of the chapter. Tato rajan abhyanujnatha krishnaya sahabandhubihi yayayu dvaravatim brahman sarjuna yadubhivrataha. O Shaunak, thereafter the Lord, having bade farewell to King Yudhishthir, Draupadi, and other relatives, started for the city of Dwarka, accompanied by Arjun and other members of the Yadu dynasty. So this is just putting a bow to the chapter. Krishna, he comes to Hastinapur. He helps in the performance of 3 Ashwamedha Yagyas. He stays for a few months for the pleasure of the Kuru Vamshis. And then after that, he bids farewell to Maharaj Yudhishthir, Draupadi, other relatives, and then he leaves for Dwarka. Now this leaving from Dwarka is different to the leaving for Dwarka that we discussed earlier on in the 10th chapter. Because the Ashwamedha Yagyas, and also in this verse it is said that he lives along with Arjun. And there clearly says that he lives along with the Uddhav and Satyaki. Arjun and the rest of the Pandavas are asked. He requests them to go back. This leaving with Arjun is significant because 2 chapters down, we will see the return of Arjun from Dwarka, and that starts a different phase of the Bhagavatam. So just to summarize the chapter, so this is the title, the birth of Emperor Parikshit, and it starts with the sages of Naimisharanya bringing the attention of Sutta Goswami back to the questions that they had asked. The Goswami was talking about Krishna Katha, and everybody was happily returning. Now the sages, they asked the same question that they asked earlier on about the circumstances surrounding the birth of Maharaj Parikshit. So they again asked this question, and Sutta Goswami begins by first talking about the glories of Maharaj Yudhishthir. And we had discussed that they glorify Maharaj Yudhishthir both as a glorious ancestor of Parishad Maharaj and also a qualified ancestor of or one who's qualified to have somebody as glorious as Parishad Maharaj as their descendant. Then after that, Sutta Goswami, he describes the vision of Parishad Maharaj within the womb of Uttara, how Krishna enters as Paramatma in his Chaturbhuja form, how he neutralizes the Brahmastra. After that is the birth of Parishad Maharaj, and the bulk of the chapter is the predictions that are made by the Vipras about the qualities of Parishad Maharaj, his activities, and his passing away, the circumstances of his death, in direct reference to the speaking of the Bhagavatam. And then the chapter concludes with Maharaj Yudhishthir performing the 3 Ashwamedha Yagyas under the guidance of Krishna, and Krishna leaving along with Arjun to Dwarka. So I'll stop over here and then see if there are any discussion either on this part of the chapter or any questions that we have from the previous discussions.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I have a question on in terms of like you touched a little bit on the modes of like how a particular mode can be changed by like changing it to like a city, right? I mean, like you do gardens and things like that, and then basically bring a city into the mode of goodness from passion and ignorance. So more on those lines, like, and also we discussed Parikshit Maharaj's like predictions by the Brahmanas of his qualities, the 20 qualities that we discussed. So basically it was already it was already predicted that he will have good qualities even before he was born, based on whatever, like his previous birth, or based on the time that he was born, or things like that. So these more like if somebody is not born in the higher modes, or in goodness or something like that, then basically the training or the environment are the only ways to bring that person to the mode of goodness, right? So but if the nature of the person, like because he or she is not born in the mode of goodness, is like not so that will it will be difficult for that person to change, right? I mean, even because of the environment. And So, like, how to change that nature, intrinsic nature of, or intrinsic mode that the person is born with? I guess that's my question.
So, if you look at it from the perspective of Bhagavad Gita, um, uh, the intrinsic nature that a person is born with is dependent on two things: the desires of the person and the activities of the person. So the desires of the person shape the thoughts of the person at the time of death, and that's why it said that, that's how he gets a particular kind of eyes, ears, senses, basically talking about his gross and subtle body, and also based on karma, on the activities that a person has done. And both of these are impermanent. Both of these are changeable. So as we know, the Bhagavad Gita says that of the 5 subjects, 4 cannot be changed, 1 can be changed. That is karma. So the result of karma is our circumstances, our destiny, and that can be changed. And what we are is predicated to a great extent, also in terms of what we want to be. So by understanding that these are the 2 factors, these 2 factors can be manipulated to change.
Sorry, Raji, which one cannot be changed, you said, out of the 5 topics?
So out of the 5 topics, 4, so the 5 topics that Bhagavad Gita speaks about is Krishna, Jiva, Prakriti, Kal, and Karma. 4 cannot be changed. So with the exception of karma, 4 things cannot be changed. Krishna cannot be changed, Jiva cannot be changed.
Right. Yeah, that's how I heard the other way, sorry.
Yeah, okay. So, so what is the process of changing karma? Karma can be changed by karma, or karma can be changed by Krishna. Right. So that gives us the first clue to the answer of your question, that how can we change one's propensity, is by changing the influence of karma. So the whole process of samskars, the whole process of karma is essentially that. We don't do that because we can't, so we rely on anugraha from Krishna and Vaishnavas. And the second aspect to it is the desire of the person, which cannot be changed from outside inside, but from within. So when these two factors come in confluence, that a person desires to make a change, and the change is affected by linking oneself to the process of bhakti, then any what's the right word? Any obstacles that are there because of one's intrinsic propensity, one's low birth, one's surroundings, they can be overcome. So I guess to condense the answer, I'll just repeat the 2 things that can help in changing is the person desiring to make the change, and the person linking oneself to the process of devotional service.
Thank you, Guru.
Thank you.
Raji, one more follow-up quick. I mean, I kind of like, it's kind of understood, but still, so like you mentioned about changing the environment, like changing bringing the environment more into the mode of goodness. So that basically also helps in, like, even like changing it. So basically, um, changing our surroundings to bring it to more of mode of goodness, like that will also help us in our bringing
Right.
peace of mind and things
Right.
like that.
Right. It's a means. It's a means to an end, right? Um, the reason I'm not emphasizing on it is because, in a conventional sense, it is looked upon it as an end in itself. That people retire to ashrams that are in hilly stations, sattvic areas, right? And as long as that is connected with some spiritual activity, it just becomes a kind of a covered sense gratification, and so it does not achieve much. But if you go to an ashram and then use the sattvic environment over there to be able to study the Bhagavatam or chant better, then yes, then we are basically using the more of goodness in the service of making spiritual advancements. So in itself, uh, at least in the current day and age, in trying to cultivate a mode of goodness, firstly, it's difficult, and secondly, it's pointless unless it is linked to a deliberate attempt to make spiritual advancements. So, like, following the four regulative principles is creating an mode of goodness, right? But in itself, the four regulative principles don't mean anything. The only reason that, along with the four regulative principles, you also take the vow to chant 16 rounds every day, that makes the process of initiation relevant. If somebody just stopped at the four regulative principle, then it's not really spiritual initiation. There's no Krishna in the four regulative principles. But the reason that they are still mentioned there is basically trying to use the mode of goodness in the service of making spiritual advancements.
Right. Thank you, Prabhu.
Mhm.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. In the verse 32 and 34, a little bit, I have like a reconciling question. Where we spoke about Yudhishthira Maharaj was more anxious to perform yajna due to fear of sin or afraid of sin. Also, these sins in 34, we've said that probably the inadvertently might be incurred, maybe due to war in Kurukshetra or whatever might be the reason, right? So the question really is, also we spoke about to fulfill or not fulfill, to meet the financial situation of the kingdom, he had to do certain activities. So what is the priority here as a king, what he has to do? This performing yajna is related, or will it lead to the financial situation, or how to reconcile that?
So the question is that, I'm sorry, I didn't get your question. Just repeat it, please.
Yeah, Yudhishthira Maharaj was performing yajna to for the fear of sin. Also, he had an immediate need to fulfill or fill up his financial status of the kingdom, right?
That doesn't, at least I didn't get the sense from the flow of the verses that he got the wealth of King Marut to replenish his treasury. It just says that his treasury was depleted because of the battle of Mahabharat, so he did not have the wealth to perform the yajnas. So the sense that I got is that he got enough wealth to perform the yajnas.
So he got the wealth from Marut, and that is a separate. We should
look at. Okay. And the second question I had is, if he is in the spiritual, probably this is only not question, probably confirmation. As he is in the spiritual realm, performing the yajna uh, due to fear is only to meet those sinful activities which were performed, even though he is situated at spiritual realm, right? Because in spiritual realm there's no scope of fear.
There's no scope of fear, you're right. And this is Mahabharat, right? So Mahabharat it's also Lokik, it's also Bhautik, it is also Adhyatmic.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that Maharaj Yudhishthir fought this battle to please Krishna makes it an act of bhakti. And in bhakti there is no sin, so there was no need for him to perform any Ashwamedha Yagya is Karmakand. So there was no need for him to perform that that yagya. But at the same time, Mahabharata also establishes the principles of morality. So from that perspective, it is justified that in the inevitable execution of his duty. So we are talking about dharma over here, not paradharma.
Mm-hmm.
So as in his dharma was to remove miscreants who had usurped his kingdom. All that was as part of his duty, but he had to perform activities that had reactions to them. So he was countering that reactions by performing of avyagya, which is what is the recommended course of action
During the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. One question. Sometimes I heard that spiritual master should never be treated like a father. He is your teacher, and the relation is only one is teaching and other one is learning from him. But sometimes I even heard that he is like your uh, uh, father. So how should we in general we see, because for any woman, like we can say Mataji very easily, but generally uh, even senior Vaishnavas, we will never see like a spiritual master or mentor like father. How should we see in general?
So I'm not sure. I would like to find out the source of the statement you're making. That you said that you heard that a spiritual master should never be treated like a father. This is the first time that I'm hearing that. If you look at the Vyas Puja submissions to Srila Prabhupada, one of the things that comes up again and again is that you are our spiritual father. You know, we are glad we are your spiritual children. The mood of a guru and a disciple is very very similar to Vatsalya. That's why the spiritual master's wife is considered like a mother. The spiritual master is considered like a father. Perhaps what you have heard about is that at least in the seminal relationship, there is some sense of intimacy also between the child and the father. The Aishwarya Bhav is, or it has a potential of being eclipsed. So the child will come and sit on the lap of the father, or the child might ask for things from the father, mostly when the child is young in age. So maybe that aspect of the relationship is not encouraged in the relationship with the guru. Even though there are cases where the disciple actually treats the spiritual master in a very familial way, as a father. If you see the beginning of the Mahabharata, the opening section of the Mahabharata actually talks about the relationship between a guru and three sons, three disciples. And and one of the disciple, he sees the disciple has a very intimate relationship with the guru. So the guru says that so he sees the disciple becoming healthy and fat, and he says, "How come you're getting fat?" And he says, "I'm getting a lot of so when I beg for food for you, I get a lot of food. I know you don't eat so much food, so I eat most of it." And then he says, "Come on, you can't do that. You can't. The food is meant for me. You give it to me. Whatever I give you, then you eat it." And he says, "Okay." Then he sees he's still fat. And then he says, "How come you're still fat?" "Because I'm not giving you any food." And he said, "Even though you don't give me food, there's so much of food over here and there, so I eat food." And then he said, "But you can't, without my permission, you should not eat." He says, "Okay." And then he says, still see him getting fat. And he says, "How come you're still getting fat?" And he says, "I don't eat now, but I drink the milk from the cows." So you see that mood, and the guru is very affectionate to the disciple, and the disciple just has a lot of fondness of eating. So you see that mood of intimacy there. But in general, I would agree with you that aspect of the relationship that is very informal probably is not encouraged between a diksha relationship. But the other part of the mood of seeking protection, of serving, taking shelter, that part is very similar. Okay.
Yes, Prabhuji. There is always a sense of fear when we are approaching, respect and fear together when we approach spiritual master. It is not very casual.
Yeah.
So, yes, Prabhu. Thank you.
Okay. So if there are no more questions, we'll end over here a few minutes early. Thank you very much. So next week we'll start from the 13th chapter, Dhritarashtra quits home. And as usual, I would recommend that you read the chapter in its entirety. It's a little long chapter. I think it has about 60 verses in it, but not 60. It has 30 and something verses in it. I'm actually confusing it with the 14th chapter. No. I'm sorry. It does have 60 verses in it. It's a long chapter. It has the conversation between Dhritarashtra and Vidur, and finally the renunciation of Dhritarashtra. So please read the chapter. It has quite a few philosophical points that are made there. Okay, so I'll end here. Vanchakalpatarubhayashchit kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Anant Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nithai Gaur Premanand Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhuji.